Tonight on The ReidOut.
This election is now over. Congress has certified the results. I don't want to say the election's over. I just want to say Congress has certified the results without saying the election's over, okay?
He just could not say that it was over. The perfect summation of the 8 blockbuster January 6th hearings. And as we learned last night, that 187 minutes on January 6th was not inaction. He was actually watching and waiting for his coup to succeed. Also tonight, Steve Bannon guilty on both counts and facing up to 2 years in prison for defying subpoenas from the January 6th committee. And the chilling audio recordings of Mike Pence's Secret Service agents fearing for their lives, and how Trump was probably a little too tight with some of his own agents, which might explain those missing text messages. But we begin tonight with the clearest picture yet of what was supposed to happen on January 6th, in the mind of Donald Trump, that is. The framing up until now has always been about Trump's dereliction of duty that day as commander-in-chief. But the important distinction laid out by the January 6th committee last night in the season finale, as it were, of their blockbuster hearings is that Trump didn't fail to act. He chose not to act. Instead, actively waiting for his plan to be realized, to be executed with military precision. He was, in a way, acting as commander-in-chief after all, just not for the people he was elected to lead.
The mob was accomplishing President Trump's purpose, so of course he didn't intervene. Here's what will be clear by the end of this hearing. President Trump did not fail to act during the 187 minutes between leaving the ellipse and telling the mob to go home. He chose not to act.
The committee also shared that Trump did not call the vice president or anyone in the military or federal law enforcement to try to end the violence. Details confirmed by his inner circle.
Are you aware of any phone call by the President of the United States to the Secretary of Homeland Security that day?
I'm not aware of that, no.
Did you ever hear the president
No.
ask for the National
No.
Guard? Did you ever hear the president ask for law enforcement response?
No.
In the Commander-in-Chief, you got an assault going on the Capitol of the United States of America. And there's nothing. No call, nothing, zero.
But Trump did make some calls. He was calling senators to encourage them to delay or object to the certification. He did this as he watched his plan unfold from his private dining room in the White House. The plan, of course, was to delay the certification of Joe Biden's election and thus to overturn it. To even march to the Capitol himself, where members of Congress were running for their lives. It was a demand, an order that stunned the unidentified White House security official working for Trump.
To be completely honest, we were all in a state of shock that this was no longer a rally, that this was going to move to something else if he physically walked to the Capitol. I don't know if you want to use the word insurrection, coup, whatever. We all knew that this would move from a normal democratic, public event into something else.
That something else became what a Capitol police officer described as a war scene. People died. 140 police officers were assaulted as gory bloodshed polluted our Capitol. American democracy did not die that day, but it wasn't because Trump came to his senses. It was because his vice president chose country over Trump.
On the screen is the last photograph of the president that night as he went into the residence. As he was gathering his things in the dining room to leave, President Trump reflected on the day's events with a White House employee. This was the same employee who had met President Trump in the Oval Office after he returned from the ellipse. President Trump said nothing to the employee about the attack. He said only, quote, "Mike Pence let me down."
Now, we're not letting Mike Pence entirely off the hook, by the way. Because after all of that, the violent attempted overthrow, the deaths, the Secret Service detail, calling loved ones to say their last goodbyes, his detail specifically. Well, the vice president himself hiding in an underground parking garage. Oh, and the gallows, everybody, the gallows, the so-called day of the rope. Even after all of that, Pence still has not fully rejected Trump. And he isn't the only one, which is another type of crisis we need to address as well. Trump did not fail to act that day. He didn't want to. And he's worked hard to keep that from America, so much so that he didn't even want it documented by the White House photographer. Joining me now is Andrew Weissmann, MSNBC legal analyst and former FBI general counsel, who was a senior member of special counsel Robert Mueller's investigative team, and Frank Figliuzzi, MSNBC national security analyst and a former FBI official. Thank you all both for being here. And I do want to kind of start with, I'm going to go kind of a little bit backwards here, Andrew Weissmann, because, you know, we talked to you, got a chance to talk to you last night with Rachel and Nicole and all of us. But I want to kind of reiterate a little bit of what we talked about last night, because for me, as a layperson, as a non-lawyer, I can see the thread to seditious conspiracy, because it seems to me that everything that's happened so far, everything that the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers have been charged for, only benefit one man. And now that we know that Trump wasn't inactive, he was active. He was actually using the 187 minutes as like the stall time to get his plan to work, to get Pence to do what he wanted. I cannot see how he could not be charged with something. And yet, you know, Merrick Garland said the right thing. Let me play what Merrick Garland said. This is cut 5. I'm sorry, I'm jumping around for my producers. This is 5. This is Merrick Garland speaking recently.
No person is above the law in this country. Nothing stops us. I don't know how to, maybe I'll say that again. No person is above the law in this country. I can't say it any more clearly than that.
Rachel last night said that's his version of screaming, right? And Andrew Weissmann, you know him better than I do. Do you believe that the Justice Department, with all that we've seen in these hearings, could possibly avoid indicting Donald Trump for a crime?
Well, I think the first step is, can they avoid having a full-scale investigation into all of the aspects of the way in which he was conducting this coup? We know that they are looking at the people who participated in the actual physical assault of the Capitol. And we know that there is indications that they're looking at the fake elector scheme. And they've started to, at least a part of the Department of Justice has looked at some of the Department of Justice officials who seem to be playing into the president's scheme. But there is no evidence that I'm aware of that they have interviewed or put in the grand jury a single person who worked in the Trump White House. And that is what I'm really waiting for, is to see that Merrick Garland is going to carry through. Now, he is an honest, good person. And I think that what he was signaling in that clip that you played and then he went on, I think that he does get it. It's impossible for any sentient person to have listened to the evidence and not know that there is tons of factual predication for a full-scale investigation. And that means resources and backbone and leadership. And this means that people really rightly can look to Merrick Garland as needing to provide all that at this point.
And just to stay with you just for a minute, Andrew, Bannon, now guilty on 2 counts of obstructing, 2 counts because of contempt of Congress for basically just blowing off the committee and saying he wouldn't, that he wouldn't cooperate. Peter Navarro was also indicted by a grand jury for not complying with a committee subpoena. He's pleaded not guilty. There are 2 others, Mark Meadows, Dan Scavino, were not charged. But does the Bannon conviction move us any closer and make him some sort of, potential witness? Does it have any bearing on the overall investigation?
I think it does, but I think indirectly. I think I don't think that we're ever going to see Steve Bannon as a full cooperating witness. Yeah. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think that this charge has enough prison time that is going to cause him to flip. And that is how you flip people. He clearly doesn't have the moral fiber to behave like Cassidy Hutchinson and other people. Yeah. But I do think it sends a message to everyone else who gets a subpoena that you could end up in being a defendant in a case, and that the Justice Department means business, and that, as the U.S. Attorney said today, a subpoena is not an invitation to a party. It is not a request. It is something that when somebody gets it, an American citizen gets it, you have to comply with it, and there are consequences when you don't. So I do think we'll have consequences for other people who the committee wants to talk to.
Yeah, and Frank, let me bring you in here because, I mean, some of what we saw last night, is incredibly dramatic. I mean, this picture of, Chuck Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader, and Mitch McConnell, and all the rest of them, who's now the Majority Leader, all calling for help, all asking for help. Mark Milley talking about the fact that, he was asked to form a narrative that Vice President Pence wasn't the one in charge when he actually was. And he was like, I don't do narratives. Sorry, I'm not doing that. But, I mean, the reason this, to me, is urgent for me and for a lot of Americans is that the plan isn't over. There is some really scary reporting at Axios right now. Jonathan Swan, let me read a little bit of it. Trump allies are working on plans that would potentially, if Donald Trump were to be reelected and get another term, strip layers at the Justice Department, including the FBI, and reaching into national security, intelligence, the State Department, and the Pentagon. Sources close to the former president say the heart of the plan is derived from an executive order known as Schedule F, developed and refined in secret over most of the second half of Trump's term and launched 13 days before the 2020 election. They want to completely dismantle the government, take out the contents, and put in MAGA Trump people for God knows what purpose. Are you as worried as I am if Donald Trump were to get back into the White House?
Oh, yeah. If you thought season 1 of Trump administration was dangerous to democracy, just wait for season 2. This is a great piece by Jonathan Swan, by the way. And it says, look, this Schedule F concept could actually impact the president's ability to remove about 50,000 federal government employees. Now, people may say, well, there's millions of people in military. What's 50,000? It means you go to the second and third layer at key agencies. It means that, we're all familiar with political appointments. Yes, the director of the FBI. Yes, we get that. But now think about going down a couple of levels. Go to the deputy director. Go to the assistant directors, a position that I held. How about going to the special agent in charge of every single FBI field office and making them subject to Trump's whim and having Trump name them to their job? Now do that throughout the government, throughout the intelligence community. And you have a nightmare on your hands, and you really would have the destruction of democracy as we know it.